trauma bond. What is it? It is a relationship. It is a type of attachment between an abuser and someone who has been abused. That is the origin of what we talk about when we talk in mental health about a trauma bond. Now, there are different types of abuse, and one of them is neglect. A person can be in a relationship, whether a family relationship or a romantic relationship, and they can also be neglected to the point where they get the littlest amount of love and attention, and just that little bit of goodness and sweetness keeps that person coming back, attached to the person who abuses them or neglects them. And they pray, pray, pray. If they do all the right things and are very, very careful and compliant and make that other person happy, that they might soon again get some of that love or sweetness or attention again. It's like a perpetual yearning that is involved in any trauma bond relationship. There is always this undercurrent of hoping, emotionally chasing, maybe, just maybe, I might be able to feel good soon. Soon. Okay? There are a couple of different ways to think about a trauma bond, and one is cycles of abuse followed by sweetness. A cycle of abuse followed by sweetness or kindness. People don't stay in trauma bond relationships, relationships that have highs and lows. They don't stay in those relationships because it's all bad. If, in fact, it were all bad, most people sooner or later would do everything in their power to find a way to leave. It is the intermittent reinforcement. It is the moments where sometimes there is some kindness, some sweetness, some good love, some feeling of moments of emotional safety that keep a person rooted. Now, I will also say there is something called sunk cost in psychology, the sunk cost fallacy. And what that means is that sometimes people who have invested so much already in something, like investing so much in a relationship, after spending so much time and energy investing, they feel like they don't want to sink all of that time and investment and walk away. They tell themselves that because they've already invested so much, well, they have to wait a little longer, invest a little bit more to see if things get better. Okay. So the big picture that I want you to walk away with is what I call the kind of 1-2 punch of the trauma bond. And that is there are two basic factors that keep someone locked into that pull of the trauma bond. One is physiological, okay? And the other is psychological. Now, the physiological component is that after somebody is abused or neglected as a pattern, of course, they start feeling bad. They start feeling down. They may feel depressed. They may feel all sorts of negative feelings. And yet, true to definition of a trauma bond, when that person they're in the relationship with comes back and does give them moments of good love or attention, the physiological component is they feel this rush of oxytocin and dopamine. Physiologically, they can notice, they feel this body excitement of feeling that kind of bliss of reunion with that person after they have felt isolated from them, detached from them. So there is a real physiological pull that keeps people so attached to the possibility that a good moment can come again with them. That's the physiological component. Now, the psychological component is, and you will probably just know this automatically, what is the cost? What ultimately happens to a person's sense of self after they have been mistreated or neglected as a pattern for too long? What happens? What happens to their self-esteem? What happens? And this is upsetting to think about. What happens to their dignity? Their just belief in their own naturally deserved sense of dignity as a person, as a human being, after being mistreated or neglected for too long. Well, the self-esteem, the spirit, a person's sense of dignity and deserving, a person's hopefulness of what the future might bring, all of that gets blotted out, knocked down by too much mistreatment and neglect over time, so that the person in the trauma bond relationship on the receiving end of the neglect or abuse, you know how they feel? They don't feel strong and positive and empowered. Quite the opposite. They feel small. They feel small in almost every meaning of that word. This is why the 1-2 punch of a trauma bond relationship, this is why it is so difficult for people to get out of it. This is the pull that keeps people in it. And one of the most important things that people need to think about doing when they've gotten to this point, friends and family and social supports that are positive, those can be helpful. But honestly, a true trauma bond relationship, when someone is dealing with it, one of the few things I have ever seen as a psychologist that helps people truly get over it. And I'm talking about people I've worked with clinically in over 20 years as a psychologist, and also having my own individual personal life, people I've seen in my personal life. Finding a good therapist is one of the few things I have found that can actually help a person overcome it. It is a very positive attachment, a new, trusted, reliable attachment with someone like a good therapist who has good boundaries and can focus their attention on your emotional needs and be attuned to them and walk you through all the daily situations in your life where you may feel overwhelmed and tempted to either stay in a trauma bond relationship, or if you're out of one, tempted to actually get back in another one. A lot of times it's actually a therapeutic relationship that's really needed to help overcome those urges. I'm Dr. Seth, psychologist.